Join me in creating this beautiful bracelet. It takes very little skill to make and looks like an intensely complicated design. Remember, if you need any materials, check out the links below in the description to shop with us online. So to begin our project, we are going to put a stop bead on 5 feet of beading thread. And I'm using 0.006 with a size 12 needle. You can use a 10 as well for this project. I'm going to begin with, next to the stop bead, which has about a 3-inch tail, I'm going to begin with a ladder stitch or a square stitch grouped together, depending on kind of how you're looking at it. I'm going to begin with 4 of my Delica beads, and these are the Delicas in the opaque burnt orange rust, and I'm going to let them drop down next to my stop bead. From here, I'm going to pick up another 4 Delicas. These 4 Delicas are going to sit right on top of the 4 that I just added. Coming out the top of those 4, I'm going to sew into the bottom of those same 4 after adding 4 more. So I'm staying away from those stop bead. Now I'm going to take my thread and needle back through the 4 I just added, which will put it out kind of right next to that stop bead. There I have my 2 original sets of 4. I'm going to add a 3rd set of 4. So 4 Delicas go on. Coming out the bottom of that one, I go into the top. So you're always going into the opposite side of where your thread is coming out of. You pull that next grouping of beads on top of the previous row, which your thread is currently coming out of, and then you sew through the row that you just added to progress. After 3 Delicas get added, I want to go ahead and add 3 rows rather. I want to go ahead and add my Tila bead. You can do this with a half Tila, quarter Tila, any really 2-hole bead. You're just going to have to line up the amount of seed beads. I'm using the metallic brown iris. After putting on the Tila bead through one of the holes, once again, I'm coming out the top of that row. I'm going to go into the bottom. So I'm going into whatever the opposite side is. Go ahead then and pull the Tila tight against the last row. Take your thread and needle back through the Tila bead. We're going to repeat this pattern over and over as we get started doing 3 of our Delica groups of 4 and then our Tila bead. Now we're going to get ready to put crystals at the ends of the Tila that we're going to go back and grab then as we kind of get this patchwork design going. I'm going to grab some 15-0s, and these 15s are nice because they match a ton of colors. So if you need to invest in something metallic gold iris, they're a Miyuki seed bead. And then we're going to use the metallic bronze iris crystals. And the metallic bronze iris crystals are in a 2mm round. These are going to cap the Delicas, or the Tila beads rather, as we're working on them. So on goes a 15, and then your crystal, and then a 15. The thread and needle then go into the 2nd hole of the Tila. Now at this point here, if you were just doing a ladder stitch, you could go right into your Delica beads. What I want to do is make sure that I add crystals to both sides of my Tila. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, adding a 15, a crystal and a 15, and then coming back down through that 1st hole of the Tila bead. That adds that crystal right on the top. You just want to pull down and make sure you don't see a ton of extra thread showing. From here, I'm already coming out the 15. My thread just naturally wanted to go through that bead with the needle. I'm going to go back through the crystal, back through the 15, and then make sure I'm coming out through my Tila bead. Now we just repeat over and over and over again. 4 Delicas go on, coming out the top of the Tila, go into the bottom of the Tila. And as you're doing the Tila connection here, you just want to make sure you're not sewing into those 15-0s at all. Once you're through the Tila bead, you're going to come back down through those 4 Delica beads. If you don't have any Delicas on hand, you could also try this with 3mm bugles. I like the way that the Delicas look when they're lined up next to one another. 4 beads go on, coming out the bottom, I go into the top. Connecting that then, you're going back through those beads. So it's very, very simple, easy for beginners to use. A lot of beginners are going to be a little hesitant to use the Tila beads. This is a great introduction to it. Coming out the top there, I go into the bottom after adding the 4 beads. let them lay against the last row, and then go back through the 4 that you just added. Once again, I'm to the point where I'm going to put on my Tila bead. Tila goes on, so back through the beads that you've already done, so you're doing the exact same method. The only thing, once again, that changes a little bit here after coming back up through the Tila is that we're going to decorate the Tila from the first hole to the second hole. If you would just want to do a simple wrap bracelet, just go right into the second hole and don't add the crystals here. Crystals get added with a 15 before and after. So from the first hole of the Tila, to the second hole of the Tila. Make sure those 15 sit right next to your Tila, and then repeat. 15, crystal, 15, sewing back to the first hole of the Tila. Once you're through there, you're going to reinforce, going through the 15, crystal 15, back through the Tila, and then continuing on with your set of 3 beads. You're going to continue this for your whole length of your bracelet. So if you want a 7.5 or 7 1/4 inch, you're going to do this right for about 7 inches. You want it a little bit shorter, you're going to do it a little bit shorter. Your clasp is only going to add about 1/4 to 1/2 inch, depending on which style you select. Once you're done stringing the base of the bracelet, which I have about 15 of my Tilas here, I'm going to get ready to put on my clasp, which I'm using one of our cup buttons. And I'm going to take my 15 OC beads and add 2 and 3 15 O's coming out of a 3rd row of my Delica beads. I'm going to switch over and add 1 of my 11 OC beads and then 2 more of my 15s. Grab a cup button and go up through the back. Coming out the front here, I want to bring in some of that orange color. So I'm going to go with a Delica 11O Delica bead and then down through the other side of the clasp. Coming out the back here, I want to add 2 more 15s. So back through that 11O in the opposite direction that we're sharing here to make a little V for the clasp there. I'm going to add 3 more 15s and then sew through those 4 Delicas and out. So you can see how it just comes nice and out to a little V-style clasp there. From here, we're going to get ready to go down through the sides of the piece, adding in our second Tila and utilizing our 11 O's. The 11 O's that I'm going to be using are the Sparkle Topaz lined 11 O's. And if you're looking at the sample piece, I have the beautiful opaque mauve luster and then some beautiful purple violet seed beads. They are the violet luster. When exiting out of the last of the Tila beads there, I want you to put onto your thread and needle 4 of your 11O seed beads and sew through your crystal. We're going to come up the right side here, adding and sewing from crystal to crystal while we add an 11O seed bead, followed by a Tila, followed by another 11O seed bead, and sew through that next crystal. Once again, 11O and Tila, 11O, sew through that next crystal. You can see how that's going to line up perfectly along the side. We're going to go the whole way up on the right hand side here, adding in that 11O Tila, link on the side, add a little loop for our clasp and come back down the side doing the exact same thing on the opposite side. Coming out of the last crystal here, I have 4 of my 11O seed beads on my needle and thread, and I'm going to sew back from the stop bead through my row of 4 Delica beads. We're going to mirror the opposite side here as we create the loop for our button to sit inside of. 3 15s go on, followed by 1 11O, and then I'm going to do one 11O, and then I'm going to do a series of my Delicas for that nice orange pop of color. You want to do approximately 28 to 30 Delicas if you're doing one of the cup buttons. If you're doing a different clasp or closure, if you have a clasp guard and clasp or a Potomac's clasp, go ahead and put a wire guard on here, add your clasp, and then finish that off. It's very simple. This is just our first round of our clasp. And then what we're going to do is come back down through the project, adding our Tilas on the other side. After we add our Tilas on the other side then, we are going to have an opportunity as we come back up through the project once again to reinforce the clasp as we're working on it. After I have my loop big enough, I need to add a couple more. I'm going to add 3 of my 15 O's go through my 4 Delica beads from the right here to the left, and then back down the right side, 4 11-0s, followed by our series of 11 Tila 11 going through the crystal and continuing on. Coming out the last crystal, we're going to repeat here what we did with the start, adding in 4 11-0 seed beads, going through that last row of our Delica beads. We're going to reinforce our clasp, going up through the 15s, through that shared 11, through the 15s before the cup button, up through the button, and at the same time, if you can, go through the seed beads if you're using a button. It's much easier to do as the needle is coming out of the button itself. Go down through the seed beads and down through the other side of the back of the button. Down through the seed beads there to reinforce, as well as once again through that 11-0 seed bead. Now we're going to go back and come down through the top hole of our Tila bead. So I want you to get your needle in position going through the 311 or 315s here. Sewing down through the Tila one more time, or down through the Delicas one more time rather. Going through your 11-0 seed beads and out. This is going to get us in position on all corners. We're going to do the same thing, coming out of the 11-0 seed bead before the first crystal, before we advanced to go into the Tilas and catch on to the second hole of our Tilas, both down the right and the left side of the bracelet. Once you're coming out of the 11-0 seed beads there, you can pop in 3 of your Delicas or 3 of your seed beads. I'm choosing to pull that orange color to the outside, that nice rust color, and use 4 Delica beads before I go into my second hole of my Tilas. 4 Delica beads, second hole of the Tilas. You can see in the sample piece here as well, I did 4 of my 11-0 seed beads through the Tila, 4 11-0 seed beads. So you can change up which bead you are using as you just sew along, adding your 4 Delica beads and then right through the next Tila. We're going to go down the right side here, adding in that pop of color. We're going to reinforce our clasp and then come the whole way back up the right side till I'm back, or left side till I'm back at my button. When I'm here at the clasp end, after coming through, adding in 3 more of my Delica beads here, going through those 4 seed beads, circling through the Delicas there, and then up through the clasp, once again down here. I'm going to knot off the starter thread there before I proceed back up the left-hand side, adding in that pop of orange to the outer edge. At the end of the bracelet, coming out of the last Tila here, you can see how that nice color pop works. You can add your 3 Delicas and then sew into your 4 11-0 seed beads. We've already reinforced the clasp here twice, but if you want to, you can reinforce again, or you can sew back through the project and tie off your extra thread. So I'm just going to sew back through the Delicas to tie off my extra thread. Let the thread and needle kind of go where it wants to go. It came out to the side here, so I'm just going to progress to the side, go through that seed bead. And anytime you're doing a clasp or a closure, it's always nice if you can get it in your thread end in a very nice inconspicuous place where you're not going to see it a ton. I'm going to go right here along my ladder stitch. So underneath one of those threads that connects the two together, that bridge thread, make a loop, sew through the loop once, sew through the loop twice. That's going to create a nice little sewer's knot there. Give a nice tight pull on the thread, pulling that knot as close to the piece as possible, and then sewing back a couple more stitches. Just repeating that ladder stitch here, sewing it and zigzagging down, pulling the thread out, grabbing my thread burner or my thread zap, and burning down that extra little piece to finish off our beautiful bracelet. It's a nice way to work with the Tilas without having to know a lot of techniques and a lot of different stitches. You're just sewing up and down, basically adding the two together and making a nice statement piece. You can continue on as wide as you want with this bracelet, having done a whole nother row if you want to of the Tila beads going in and having them be opposite coming out through the sides here. So the options are really endless when it comes to how wide to make the bracelet or what colors and what versions to create and to share making. Thanks so much for joining me in making this Ayers Rock bracelet. Remember, if you need any materials, go ahead and look in the links below in the description to shop with us online. Remember also, you can post your own pictures of your different color combinations in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. Don't forget, if you haven't yet, to hit that subscribe button. I noticed a lot of you don't subscribe, and I don't want you to miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. As always, thanks so much for watching, happy beading, and stay tuned for the next video.